The train bound for Ojium is now arriving. Please refrain from forcing your way in when the doors are closing. If the doors are crowded, please use another door. Woo Young-kook stepped onto the train, carrying his heavy messenger bag. After finishing my delivery work, I met my family. For the first time in a while, the woman beside him said, "Young-kook, let's sit over there." He shook his head and replied, "We're getting off at the next stop anyway." She looked at him and asked, "What's wrong with sitting for a bit, Young-kook?" The man in the hoodie laughed and said, "Don't you remember? You kicked him, and he went flying into the forest." Young-kook chuckled. "Ha ha ha, did I?" The woman smiled and said, "You should have seen Dad's face back then. That old man. Actually, I didn't meet them, I just thought about my family." On the subway, a young boy ran past, shouting for his mother. The woman caught him and said, "Son, you shouldn't run around in public places." The boy looked up and asked, "But there aren't many people here?" "It doesn't matter whether there are many or few." The train roared as it entered a dark tunnel. Woo Young-kook looked down, staring at the empty seat beside him. I didn't even ride the subway. He sat alone in the dark, clutching a small train keychain tightly in his hand. Woo Young-kook held up the small trinket and stared at the ceiling. I just imagined what a subway was like at home. He looked down at a skeleton resting in the corner of the room. Actually, it is not even home. This place is just. He looked out the window at the crumbling ruins of civilization, an apocalyptic world. The old man told me, the world before I was born, about 40 years ago, was very different from now. It was a safe and peaceful world. It was a safe and peaceful world, but misfortune came without warning. Black pillars. No one knew where they came from, and they poured down from the sky, like rain. They poured down from the sky like rain, and so the world ended. All that remained was a cut-off world, and a handful of survivors. Woo Young-kook walked through the silent ruins, and so the world ended. All that remained was a cut-off world, and a handful of survivors. Of course, all of this is just the old man's story. Woo Young-kook walked through the ruins, and dropped a small keychain. When I was little, most of his stories were hard to believe, but among them, there was one thing I could never accept. Subway. He gripped the small train model tightly. So many strangers packed tightly into such a narrow space. That's basically asking to be killed. Woo Young-kook walked through the ruins. They say it was possible because the old world was peaceful, but that is bullshit. There is no age of peace anymore. Anyone who talks about peace is 100% a con artist. Still, I kind of want to ride a subway someday, racing through deep underground tunnels at high speed. Wouldn't it feel like flying through space? He stopped abruptly. Footsteps. He quickly pressed his back against a crumbling wall. Regular footsteps. Sounds like soldiers. 3, no, 2 of them. Are they remnants of a defeated unit? Too few. Woo Young-kook watched the armed men. What are they doing in a place like this? He decided to avoid a confrontation and tried to pass by unnoticed. But the soldiers were alert. It looked like they had found his trail. One of the guards shouted, "Who's there?" His partner told him to calm down, as they both aimed their weapons. The soldier looked at the uniform and asked, "What the? He's a postman? Why were you rustling around like that? What's your mission? Delivering mail?" Woo Young-kook walked toward them and replied, "I'm delivering an air raid warning. Mail delivery ended yesterday." "Let's see." The soldier in the gas mask gripped his rifle and said, "Must have been a brutal fight. Only 2 of you survived? Air raid warnings. You have it rough too, man. The reason they were looking for traces is probably..." The soldier looked down and said, "Sorry but postman." Woo Young-kook turned back and asked, "Why? Are you hungry? I actually have some food left." The men froze in surprise. The soldier stammered, "Oh really?" Woo Young-kook smirked and asked, "You got anything worth trading? Let us see what they have." The soldier scrambled through his tactical vest and said, "Of course, I have bandages, hygiene supplies, small batteries, even antibiotics." He looked up and asked, "What do you want, Mr. Postman?" Woo Young-kook looked him in the eye and said, "Ammunition." The soldier stared back. "What?" Woo Young-kook smiled and repeated, "Ammo." The helmeted man gestured to his rifle and said, "Can't you see? Ours is 5.56 millimeters. Woo Young-kook looked back at them and replied, "It's not even for me to use." The man in the gas mask asked in confusion, "What? A postman shouldn't carry too much," he explained while raising a finger. "So ammo's best. Small, light, and valuable." The man in the gas mask stuttered, "If that's the case, antibiotics or batteries?" "No," Young-kook interrupted, "I'll only take ammo." The helmeted man sighed, "I get what you mean, but we need to conserve ammo too." "Fine," Young-kook said, "1 bullet is enough for all of this." He reached into his bag and pulled out supplies. The man in the gas mask asked in disbelief, "You're giving us all this for 1 bullet? No more, no less, just 1. Young-kook replied. The man in the gas mask shook his head. "No, if antibiotics aren't enough, I'll give you a lighter too. Woo Young-kook pointed a finger and said, it has never been used, since I filled it with fuel. Hey, is one bullet really that hard to give? The man in the gas mask remained silent. If that's not it, your guns do not have live rounds, do they? The soldiers stiffened as the air grew heavy. One of them aimed his rifle and roared, you damn postman bastard, want me to show you whether the magazine is empty or not? One of them aimed his rifle and roared, you damn postman bastard, want me to show you whether the magazine is empty or not? Young-kook raised his hands with a smirk and said, whoa, why are people working for the same country fighting like this? Shut up, the soldiers shouted. We are screwed anyway, we are not going back, get it? He tightened his grip on the trigger. You useless postman. Woo Young-kook sighed and said, useless? That is a bit harsh. More importantly, can't go back. He looked at the armed men. I thought you were remnants, but you are deserters? No, not even deserters anymore. You are just bandits now, right? You bastard. One of the men roared, and lunged forward with a rifle. Woo Young-kook dodged the strike, and said, doesn't this just prove that you really don't have any bullets? He delivered a powerful kick, shattering the man's gas mask. The bandit groaned in pain, as another attacker swung a knife at his head. Woo Young-kook ducked low, narrowly avoiding the blade. Woo Young-kook dodged the blade, and said, if you were aiming for my neck, your movement was way too big. He delivered a sharp kick, sending the soldier stumbling back. The soldier grunted and said, a damn postman, how dare you? Woo Young-kook landed lightly, and replied, you have been going on about postman non-stop. Woo Young-kook parried the next strike, and replied, you have been going on about postman non-stop. Woo Young-kook lunged forward, striking the guard with force. He said, all of you, that's postman discrimination. The guard groaned in pain, as he collapsed to the ground. Woo Young-kook lunged forward, swinging a heavy fist and said, all of you, that's postman discrimination. The soldier collapsed, groaning in pain. Woo Young-kook ignored the shock, and examined the damage on his gear. He stared at the postman's arm, and shouted, hey, that thing on your arm, a mere postman, captured an officer's shield. Woo Young-kook looked down at the damaged gear. It got scratched in a bad spot. He walked toward the fallen man. How are you going to compensate me for this? If that gets found out, it's execution. He stood over the soldier. Fine. Any other bullets? The soldier looked up from the ground. What? Woo Young-kook reached into his bag and said, for example, something like this. He pulled out a black handgun and aimed it at the soldier. A hunter's handgun? The soldier gritted his teeth and asked, who are you really? Woo Young-kook smirked as he held the gun ready. Me, can't you tell? Woo Young-kook smirked and replied, me, can't you tell? I'm just an ordinary postman. Woo Young-kook looked at the tear in his uniform. I'll probably get chewed out again once I get back to headquarters. For now, should I just handle it like this? He pulled the jacket back on and adjusted the collar. If I count the scratch on my shield, I should have charged more. Well, at least I got repair money out of those guys. He settled his bag and said, all right, shall we get going? 3 hours until air raid. He walked down the desolate road, toward the massive gate in the distance. A voice shouted from the wall, stop right there, stop right there. The guard in the yellow jacket looked down from the wall and said, what? It's just a postman. The goggled guard beside him gripped his rifle and replied, I didn't hear anything about mail arriving today. Woo Young-kook stopped in his tracks and held up an official document. The goggled guard gasped, don't tell me. He looked up at the wall and said, yeah, it's an air raid warning, about 2 hours and 40 minutes left. The guards exchanged worried glances. Why would a postman be the one to announce an air raid? That's one of their roles, but they've never done it before. The fact that he showed up means a massive black pillar is about to fall. The goggled guard snapped, hey, enough chit-chat. Woo Young-kook reached into his bag and asked, are you activating the alarm? The guard turned back and shouted, W8, call the captain now. The other guard scrambled away and replied, why yes. The guard in the poncho gestured toward the entrance and said, postman, come in. Woo Young-kook followed him into the massive structure. A steel roof. They've survived surprisingly long in that condition. The sound of an alarm echoed through the halls, triggering a wave of whispers from the shadows. The alarm. Do we have to leave? Wait, are we sure he's really a postman? Kyung-hee stared ahead, her eyes wide with realization. Damn it, has this day finally come? She gritted her teeth and said, I'm staying here. The guard led the way through the dim corridor. He stopped before a figure and said, I brought him, Captain. Woo Young-kook looked at the man. So that is the leader of this settlement? There is something to keep in mind when visiting a new place. First rule, learn their unique rules. In a world where transportation and communication are cut off, the only means of contact is the postman. Scattered settlements, just to survive, created their own beliefs and their own rules. Therefore, until spoken to first. Say nothing. The leader approached him and said, "Hey Postman, you had a rough trip, did you not?" He grabbed Woo Young-kook by the shoulder and laughed. "I will buy you a drink. Follow me." The bar owner looked at the paper and said, "I don't want to cause panic among the residents. Is a black pillar really going to fall here?" Woo Young-kook adjusted his bag. 2 hours from now. That is the index predicted by the government. The man slid the document back across the counter. "These numbers, I can't really feel what they mean, but you know what they imply, don't you?" He looked up at the postman. "What are the chances our shelter survives the air raid?" Woo Young-kook turned away. "I don't know. Ask an expert. I'm just a postman." The owner narrowed his eyes. "You've seen air raids more than once. Be honest with me." "I said I don't know," he replied, waving a hand dismissively. The man slammed his hand down. "You bastard, if that's all you're going to say, get out." A masked figure in the back muttered for him to calm down. Woo Young-kook paused. "Second rule, do not interfere." He crouched down to his bag. "Even if I wanted to leave, I still have work to do." The owner leaned over him. "Official business?" Woo Young-kook looked down. "Something like that." He pulled an object from his bag. The owner stared in confusion. "What's this?" The man pointed to a small mechanical device and said, "It measures the impact of the falling black pillar. We compare the data predicted by headquarters with the actual readings." Woo Young-kook looked at the structure and asked, "You built a roof to prepare for the air raid. Wouldn't that reduce the measured impact?" Woo Young-kook shook his head. "According to experts, black pillars don't just fall." He looked down and continued, "According to experts, black pillars don't just fall from the sky. Like living organisms, they slow down while passing through the atmosphere and land precisely at their designated location, roof or no roof." He turned away and said, "So the only thing I can tell you is, 1 hour and 50 minutes left." The man watched him and asked, "What will you do?" Woo Young-kook walked through the crowded area. "This always happens whenever an outsider like me shows up. Residents are out here to barter." The crowd swarmed forward, shouting for the postman. "But the only thing I need is..." Woo Young-kook raised his voice. "Does anyone have ammunition?" The crowd went silent and began to disperse. "Figures." A voice called out from the side. Mr. Postman?" He turned to see a hand holding out a rusted grenade. "I don't have ammo, but maybe something like this?" A large man approached. "Postman, what made you trust a grenade? That might not even work. It's not antibiotics, just bandages. That's a cheap trade." A large man approached and looked at the weapon. "What made you trust a grenade? That might not even work. It's not antibiotics, just bandages. That's a cheap trade." Young-kook gripped the grenade and looked at the faint glow emanating from the metal. "And I can see it. It'll work. I'm sure of it. More importantly, why haven't you left yet?" The man leaned against a pillar. "I'm staying. Who knows? Maybe the roof will stop the pillar." He looked at Young-kook and said, "More importantly, I have a favor to ask." The large man asked, "A favor?" Kyung-hee waved and said, "Hello Mr. Postman. My name is Kyung-hee. I saw you briefly earlier." Woo Young-kook placed a hand on her head to stop her. As she continued, "I was just about to head back to headquarters. Ugh." He looked at her and asked, "What is this?" The man scratched his neck and replied, "He said there is mail that absolutely must be delivered, and that he wants to follow you. If I take it directly to headquarters, the delivery fee is cheaper, right?" Woo Young-kook asked. "You would rather follow all the way to HQ than just hand it over?" He turned away and said, "Get lost. The only thing allowed to follow me is my shadow." Kyung-hee chased after him and replied, "Then I will follow you like a shadow. It sticks because you cannot peel it off. Want to peel it off for me?" She clicked on a flashlight and shouted, "Hi-ya!" Woo Young-kook looked at the light on the ground. "You are wasting battery power on this. Are you insane?" Kyung-hee stammered, "Be but the shadow." The captain cut her off. Disqualified. She reached into her bag. "Then I'll give you this." Woo Young-kook stared at the object. "Bullets." The captain facepalmed. "Ah, Kyung-hee, you little WI?" she asked. He sighed deeply. "That ammo is, ha." Kyung-hee looked at the postman. "Isn't a postman someone you can trust?" Woo Young-kook examined the magazine. "This settlement doesn't look wealthy enough to entrust ammo to a kid. The top round is top-grade military ammunition, and the magazine is nearly full." He looked at the man. "That captain." Woo Young-kook held up the magazine. "With ammo worth this much, I could deliver it for you instead." The captain placed a hand on the girl's head. "No, take Kyung-hee with you to headquarters." "And you?" Woo Young-kook asked. The captain smiled faintly. "This is our home." The large man looked up and said, "Someone has to protect it, but I can't make Kyung-hee gamble his life too." Woo Young-kook turned away. "A roof can always be rebuilt." He started walking and said, "Follow me." Kyung-hee gripped her rifle. "Ah, yes." They walked through the ruins. As the sky grew darker, Woo Young-kook said, "Stay close. The air raid is coming soon." Kyung-hee looked at him and asked, Mr. Postman, do you really think the roof can stop this air raid? He replied, no. She widened her eyes. What? Then why didn't you tell us? Woo Young-kook looked back. 2 reasons. First, those who don't want to leave won't leave, no matter what I say. Second, a low rumble echoed through the clouds as the storm began to break. Woo Young-kook walked away toward the ruins, because there is such a thing as one in a million. He looked back over his shoulder, because maybe, just maybe, they might survive, just like I did. 30 minutes until air raid. A massive explosion shook the sky, sending tremors through the heavy walls. The masked man asked, the captain isn't going to evacuate. The captain stared at his drink. The roof that has protected us all this time is going to do its job one last time. Those words came from a man who just drank something he had been hoarding for years. The captain pushed a glass forward. Drink up. He looked at his companion and asked, did the postman say anything else? The masked man hesitated. Well, a roof like this, we can always build it again. Woo Young-kook was probably the only one who actually believed those words. The captain gripped his empty glass. The masked man looked up and asked, Captain, do you have any snacks? The shopkeeper leaned over the counter and said, well, beef jerky is all I have now. Kyung-hee chewed on a piece of jerky. It is like a magic pouch. Stuff just keeps coming out of nowhere. She looked up and asked, Mr. Postman, do you want some jerky? Woo Young-kook replied, no. He pulled out a magazine to inspect it. One magazine can hold up to 30 rounds, but the alignment of the bullets is off, meaning at least one is missing. There is no way the captain took out a bullet before giving it to the kid, which means, Kyung-hee looked at him and said, thank you for keeping your promise. What? The captain said, postmen are government people we can trust, but I thought you would take the ammo and leave me behind in the middle of nowhere. Woo Young-kook walked ahead and said, it is not like that. You are the one following me. I am not protecting you. Kyung-hee hurried to catch up, but still, I want to thank you properly. She flashed a bright smile and raised her middle finger. Thank you, Mr. Postman. Woo Young-kook froze with a strained smile. Hey kid, what does that middle finger mean? Kyung-hee tilted her head. In our settlement, it means thank you. Woo Young-kook facepalmed and sighed. Listen carefully kid, the meaning of gestures can vary from one settlement to another. Kyung-hee interrupted. My name is Kyung-hee. Yeah kid, he continued, you are not at home anymore, so you have to follow the rules of the outside world. Woo Young-kook held her hand and taught her a gesture. From now on, in situations like this, do it like this. Kyung-hee gave a thumbs up, but a sudden thunderous boom shook the air. Woo Young-kook looked at the horizon. It's time. He pulled her close and shielded her with a cloak. Cover your ears too, it's going to be very loud. Kyung-hee huddled beside him and whispered, okay. The sky is venting its pent-up rage, and black pillars will strike the earth like massive nails. Kyung-hee looked up at him. What is that? Woo Young-kook replied, it's just a saying for when black pillars fall from the sky. Decades have passed since the old era collapsed. We haven't restored civilization because of these things. It's like they have intelligence and only target vital facilities. The only places on this land safe from disasters from space are the HQ and the geofronts built underground. Kyung-hee asked, geofront? Woo Young-kook looked up at the darkening sky and said, here it comes. A blinding light pierced through the clouds and struck the ruins. Massive black pillars descended like divine wrath, shattering the remains of the city. The earth trembled as the sky rained destruction upon the silent wasteland. The kid's settlement was unlucky. Not every disaster drops a pillar quite this large. His gaze swept across the crack. Such a massive stone pillar had almost completely pierced through the entire ruins. It was an unprecedented calamity. The reason I came back was to find that measurement device in an area where building a communication network is impossible. Tools with a communication core are precious, but recovering it is no longer an option. Woo Young-kook looked back and said, kid, the job is done. We're going back to HQ. He watched her crouched on the ground and asked, what are you doing? Kyung-hee remained still, clutching her rifle. He turned away and said, let's get moving. Kyung-hee followed behind and replied, okay. They walked away from the shattered remains of the city. Kyung-hee walked through the ruins, tears streaming down her face. She stopped and asked, Mr. Postman? Woo Young-kook looked up at the dark sky. The black pillars themselves are a calamity, he said, but if there is one good thing about them, it is that after the disaster strikes, the stars in the sky are visible more clearly than any other day. Kyung-hee looked up at the shimmering galaxy above. The dust was washed away by the evening wind. From the depths of the oppressive darkness, an unprecedented radiant light emerged. It was a pure starry sky that could only be glimpsed after despair. He looked at her and said, so yeah, it is not always bad. Kyung-hee asked, are you trying to comfort me? Woo Young-kook looked away and replied, comfort? No, I just hate it when someone cries. Woo Young-kook walked ahead and said, "We have a long way to go. Crying just wastes your energy." Kyung-hee followed him and asked, "Mr. Postman, why do you do this job?" "It is a stupid question," he replied. "To make a living for myself, of course." She looked at his back. "Don't you have a dream or anything?" Woo Young-kook countered, "What about you? What message is so important that you would go through all this?" "I haven't heard your story yet, Mr. Postman," he sighed. "So noisy." "Fine, I will show you something special." Woo Young-kook pulled out a small keychain, shaped like a train car. Kyung-hee tilted her head. "What is this? Ever heard of a subway?" he asked. "It is a vehicle that carries people." She stared at the tiny object. "Even though it is only the size of a finger? This is obviously a miniature version. The real one is much bigger. Just imagine it." Woo Young-kook smiled. "Just imagine it." Woo Young-kook smiled. "Carrying hundreds of people underground. A subway that can take you anywhere you want to go." Woo Young-kook looked at the old machine and said, "It is a relic from the old era, but I hope that one day I can ride one." Kyung-hee giggled behind her hand. "You are more childish than you look, Mr. Postman." "Enough of that," he replied. "More importantly, how long are you going to hide it?" She tilted her head. "Ha! Don't play dumb. The magazine the captain gave you, it is missing one bullet, isn't it?" He looked down at her. "I am not petty enough to steal your bullet, but I need to pressure you to keep you quiet." Kyung-hee looked away nervously. "I ate it." Woo Young-kook froze. "Ha! What? Are you crazy? Why would you eat it?" "I am sorry," she cried out. The jerky was all gone, and there was no other food. He gritted his teeth in disbelief. "I know kids will eat anything, but still, you have a lot of bad habits that need fixing." Woo Young-kook reached out and said, "Kid, next time you are hungry, just tell me, okay?" Kyung-hee looked at him and said, "I can share a little food, Mr. Postman?" Woo Young-kook suddenly pulled her back, into the shadows. She stammered, "MMR Postman?" He whispered, "SHH, don't move an inch." Kyung-hee froze in confusion. What? This world wasn't ruined just by disasters from space. It was also the black monsters that emerged from the black pillars. There might be more nearby. So I will finish this one off. Without making a sound, Woo Young-kook drew a blade and crept toward the creature. The monster stood tall, its single orange eye scanning the ruins for prey. Woo Young-kook recoiled in shock. Kyung-hee suddenly raised her rifle and aimed it forward. Without a moment of hesitation, Kyung-hee pulled the trigger, and a flash of light tore through the darkness. Woo Young-kook watched in disbelief as the monsters fell. That kid, she was hiding ammo all this time? He gritted his teeth and said, "You idiot." Shadows lunged from the ruins, but he moved with blinding speed. He drew a blade and sliced through the nearest beast in one fluid motion. Woo Young-kook scanned the area and said, "There is still one more." A massive shadow loomed over Kyung-hee. Woo Young-kook lunged forward with his knife, aiming for the creature's eye, but the monster was faster, striking Kyung-hee down in a single brutal motion. But he was too late. The shadow struck Kyung-hee, sending her crashing to the ground. Woo Young-kook rushed to her side and shouted, "Kid!" He pulled her close and said, "I told you to stay put. Why don't you ever listen?" Kyung-hee coughed and replied, "You only had a knife, and I didn't think that would be enough." Woo Young-kook looked at her and asked, "Is that why you lied to me?" Kyung-hee looked up at him. "The captain taught me that to survive in this world." Kyung-hee coughed up blood and said, "You must always have at least one ace up your sleeve, but you are amazing, taking down a monster with a knife." Woo Young-kook held her and said, "Stop talking." He placed his hand over her wound, as a faint blue light flickered, but the interface only showed 0.9%. "Even with all the medicine I have, is this really the only chance? Those gunshots will draw other groups. If anyone there has a core, I won't be able to handle them alone." What does a stupid number like that even mean? Damn it. What does a stupid number like that even mean? He gritted his teeth and said, "I know." Kyung-hee looked at him and said, "I know. It is impossible now, no matter how you look at it, but can I ask for one favor? You said I could register it directly." She reached out with a trembling hand and offered a blood-stained envelope. Woo Young-kook asked, "A letter?" Kyung-hee held out a blood-stained letter. "Will you accept this, Mr. Postman?" Woo Young-kook looked at the envelope. Sender Park Kyung-hee, Shelter Gyeonggi Province, Recipient Yeongdongpo-gu Seoul. He gritted his teeth and said, "That is not the point. This is not something worth risking your life for." Kyung-hee looked up with fading eyes. "Please, I am begging you." Woo Young-kook sensed movement nearby. "Damn it, another group is already here." Kyung-hee gripped his sleeve and asked, "Mr. Postman, you still have the items from the shelter?" Woo Young-kook looked at her in confusion and asked, "What?" Kyung-hee coughed up blood and said, "Mr. Postman, you still have the items. You traded at the shelter, right? Think of it as the delivery fee, but promise me one thing." Monsters emerged from the shadows, closing in on the fallen girl and the postman. Monsters with glowing orange eyes surrounded them under the moon. Kyung-hee stood covered in blood, clutching a grenade and said, "Promise me I will create a distraction, with the grenades you traded, at the shelter. She raised the weapon, with a trembling hand. So please, I am counting on you, to deliver that letter. Kyung-hee gave a final smile. Thank you, Mr. Postman. Woo Young-kook looked back, his eyes wide with realization. She gripped the pin tightly, and pulled it without hesitation. A blinding flash of light erased the shadowy monsters, leaving nothing but smoldering remains. Woo Young-kook reached into the ashes, and retrieved a glowing orb. He said, so there really was one, with a core after all. He stood under the night sky, and looked up at the moon. It looks like, he said, I won't be able to sleep very well for a while. At the new government building, Woo Young-kook walked through the halls, exhausted from his shift. Bae spotted him and asked, Oh Young-kook, just finished work? He looked closer and asked, You don't look so good today, did work not go well? Woo Young-kook replied, No way Director Bae. Bae laughed and said, Definitely not, you are the postman of the month for a reason. He pointed a finger and said, Alright Young-kook, there is a special mission briefing, make sure you attend. Woo Young-kook replied, I am a bit tired today. Bae patted his shoulder and said, Don't be like that, just go, I am sure you will like it. Fine whatever. Bae stood before the whiteboard, and addressed the room. Since everyone is here, let's begin the meeting. The photo I'm about to show you now. Woo Young-kook stared ahead, as a memory surfaced. My vision loses focus, dust-covered memories of the past break through the surface at this moment. That once blurred figure becomes clear again. My name is Kyung-hee. Alright kid, he had replied to the girl. The meaning of gestures can vary between settlements. From now on, in situations like this, do it like this. Thank you, she had said, holding the small device. The memory faded, as a female officer raised her hand. I have a question. The cargo for the delivery will be large. Will we be using vehicles? Bae nodded and replied, This is still quite sensitive internally, but I'll tell you. Woo Young-kook leaned forward, with a grim expression. That route is absolutely impossible to go through. He pointed to the map. This is the designated delivery route. Woo Young-kook narrowed his eyes, and spoke up. That route is absolutely impossible to go through. Bae adjusted his tie, and gestured toward the maps. Behind him, he said, No it can be done, because the subway lines are being rebuilt. Woo Young-kook froze in shock, as the weight of those words finally sank in. The subway. Woo Young-kook stared ahead, as the briefing continued. Bae stood before the map, and said, Our ultimate goal is to transport hundreds of military supplies through designated transit points. We have been secretly rebuilding the subway system for these shipments, but we must complete the preliminary preparation stages before reconstruction begins. He adjusted his glasses, and looked at the crowd. I will explain further. This operation requires an impeccable track record. This mission serves as a pre-selection process for those we intend to recruit. The points awarded to those participating in this task will be. Woo Young-kook watched the officer with growing curiosity. Woo Young-kook watched him closely. What department is that officer from? I have never seen him before. Bae gestured toward the door, and said, All right, those who wish to participate, please move to the next room now. Woo Young-kook stood up, with the others. I never imagined it, but this might be the chance I needed. I might actually get to see the subway with my own eyes. Maybe I will even get to ride it. Bae reached out his hand, and looked at the young courier. You will be the exception, Mr. Woo Young-kook. Bae adjusted his glasses and replied, I was ordered to deliver this mission directly to you, Mr. Woo Young-kook. Woo Young-kook frowned and asked, What do you mean? I want to participate in this operation. Bae adjusted his glasses and replied, I was ordered to deliver this mission directly to you, Mr. Woo Young-kook. Bae pulled out a document. The task assigned to you is. Woo Young-kook stared at him. You came here already knowing my face and my name? I have a bad feeling about this. The man handed over the tablet, and said, You will be responsible for this region. Gyeongkang-gu is a residential zone that coordinates with the government, so distribution there runs smoothly. Why was I given such an easy task? The man pointed a finger, and said, Alright Young-kook, there is a special mission briefing soon, so make sure you attend. Is Director Bae pulling strings behind the scenes? No wonder he insisted I attend. My performance reflects on Director Bae. Did he put me in a safe spot, so I wouldn't die? Woo Young-kook looked at the screen, and asked, Fine, I think I get the gist. Should I start now? Bae reached out, and snatched the tablet away. No, I am going to give this job to someone else. Woo Young-kook froze. What? Then why did you even show that to me? His fingertip lightly pushed up the frame of his glasses. Behind the lenses, a cold, unwavering glint shone. I am merely carrying out my duty, ensuring the order is not passed through others, but delivered to you personally. You must have also been ordered to persuade me to join the mission, right? Bae looked him in the eye, and said, Correct, but who gets placed where is entirely up to me. Woo Young-kook glared at him. So you are going to explain it to me but you won't give me the mission? Precisely. What kind of nonsense is this? They looked over the documents and said, Mr. Woo Young-kook, I have looked into your background, and it is remarkably clean. Woo Young-kook replied, of course it is clean. I might have a few minor infractions, but I have never committed a major crime. They flipped through the file. That is the problem. Your record is still far too clean. It is as if you did not even exist before becoming a postman. He adjusted his glasses and continued, someone whose identity is so hidden must possess extraordinary abilities, or perhaps they have backing from someone very powerful. They leaned in closer. And I absolutely despise people who act entitled in this field by relying on their connections. Woo Young-kook looked up and asked, what are you trying to say to me? Bei straightened his suit. Oh, I did not mean anything personal. I am just introducing myself. I simply hate those who are underhanded. Since you seem curious about my personality, I thought I would help you out. Anyway, Woo Young-kook said, you must have seen my track record. Since I have been a postman, right? Bei nodded. True, you have never lost your spot as a top performer. Woo Young-kook smirked. Oh, so you do have eyes then? But you have never accepted any missions other than low-risk assignments. Bei countered, and I have always completed them with ease. Woo Young-kook replied. Bei narrowed his eyes. This job will only proceed with the best selected candidates. Woo Young-kook stared back and asked, so you won't trust my skills because I have never taken a dangerous job? Bei checked his radio and said, well, you're not wrong. Excuse me, I have an important call. I'll assume you understand then. He walked away and continued, I'm willing to pay the highest fee. It's just a letter, so I can rewrite it if it's lost. But considering how dangerous it is, I'd really appreciate your help. Woo Young-kook watched him leave. Then I'll give it directly to the postman tomorrow. Yeah, that's how it should be done. I'll show you exactly what express delivery means. He slammed his hand on the desk. Is this even possible? The clerk looked up and asked. It's possible, but this is difficult. Are you really going to take it from them? Woo Young-kook leaned forward. I'm just making sure everything is handled correctly. The clerk sighed and said, changing the documents isn't a problem, but this is the first time you've asked for something like this. Are you close enough to that officer to handle their request personally? Woo Young-kook smirked and replied, well, I'm working on getting closer. The clerk leaned back. Don't go dying for nothing. I won't die. I'll show that person what I'm truly capable of. I'm doing all of this for the subway. The probability of survival, even if I survive, the risk of serious injury remains. By using all available medicine, the probability that I can protect Kyung-hee after emergency treatment, her chance of surviving this situation. Kyung-hee smiled through the blood and said, thank you, Mr. Postman. Woo Young-kook snapped his eyes open and sat up in bed, panting heavily. Just as I thought, that's going to haunt me for a while. Woo Young-kook approached and said, hello, we meet again today. Bei looked up in surprise and gave a hesitant greeting. Woo Young-kook gestured to the red envelope. That letter in your hand is the one you want to send, correct? Bei turned away and said, I am busy right now, so I would appreciate it if you would leave me alone. Woo Young-kook stepped closer. I am busy too. I have to deliver your letter. Bei adjusted his glasses. What, is that true? I already checked the name of the postman assigned to this. Woo Young-kook handed over a document. That person is sick, so I am the replacement. Here are the official documents. The authorization has been processed correctly. He smiled and continued, the change was made through proper procedures, based on the principles you love so much. More importantly, if I can complete this mission 2 days before the deadline, that would make me quite skilled, wouldn't it? Bei stared at the papers, unable to find a response. Bei looked closely at him and asked, what is your reason? Is it because of your pride? Woo Young-kook looked away and replied, I do not know what you mean. I just want to work. He reached out for the red envelope. Hurry up and give me the letter. Woo Young-kook took the envelope and said, fine, letter received. I will be on my way now. As he turned to leave, Bei called out, Mr. Woo Young-kook. He stopped and asked, yes? Bei watched him. If you can complete this delivery quickly and return safely. He adjusted his glasses and shook his head. No, forget it. Bei looked at him with a serious expression. Let us meet again. Stay alive. Woo Young-kook walked down the corridor, reading the sender information. Cho Yong-han, new government complex. Yong-han? That is an unusual name. And more importantly, he looked at the red envelope, decorated with cute drawings. This cute container does not really suit them. Did they write this themselves? I cannot even imagine it. He stopped in his tracks as a memory surfaced. He stopped suddenly, staring at the envelope and the glowing orb inside. A few days ago, on my way to headquarters with Kyung-hee, I encountered a monster. Seeing how it leads a pack, it must have a core. Woo Young-kook looked at the sphere. A core obtained through Kyung-hee's sacrifice. He stood in the quiet street. Should I stop by for a moment before I leave? As if the heavens were harboring a silent rage. Black pillars fell to the earth, like nails. From those pillars, darkness crept out, and demons spread like wildfire, devouring humanity. Yet in the midst of that despair, the heavens granted one final gift, the core. Whether it was a glimmer of hope, or the seed of another curse, I cannot say for certain. Woo Young-kook looked at the glowing orb. I finally managed to get my hands on a rare core, but I cannot appraise it on my own. He placed it on the desk and asked, "Is this really useless?" Hyo-won glanced at the object. "I can tell just by looking at it. It is junk. Why would a postman want me to appraise this?" Woo Young-kook replied, "Yes, just in case." Hyo-won leaned back. "Just in case of what? Where would a postman even get a core like this?" Woo Young-kook turned to leave and said, "I will pay the appraisal fee, so just check it." Hyo-won scoffed. "This is like a taste test, to tell the difference between crap and soybean paste. It is junk. Now get out." Woo Young-kook walked away. I have dealt with this appraiser 4 years, yet he never recognizes me. At 70 years old, Hyo-won suffers from dementia. Woo Young-kook looked at the old man. "I have no choice but to use that story again." He leaned in and said, "It is about your daughter." Hyo-won narrowed his eyes. "My daughter? Why? Is something wrong?" Woo Young-kook replied, "Did you forget? The message for your daughter. I delivered it." The old man gasped. "Wait, really?" Woo Young-kook nodded. "Yeah, it was delivered safely. He told me to thank you." Hyo-won scoffed. "Thanking me for something so trivial? Today's inspection is on the house." Woo Young-kook placed a small item on the table and said, "Still, taking it for free is a bit much. Here, take some ammo. I appreciate the gesture, but I do not feel right getting free service, because I never really intended to meet Hyo-won's daughter." Hyo-won walked away and said, "Wait here for a moment." He never had a daughter to begin with. As his dementia worsened, he started talking about a child that never existed. By mentioning her, I can get him to do the appraisal for me. It is a win-win for both of us. Hyo-won returned and said, "This is the highest purity I have ever seen, but it is useless." Woo Young-kook asked, "How bad is it?" Hyo-won looked down and said, "Don't even dream of using it. The failure rate is at 99%. 99%. Cores must be used with extreme caution. When you succeed, the core will reveal its true form. There are many types of cores. In this ruined world, energy cores replace electricity, and communication cores reconnect a disconnected world. But the most valuable among them is undoubtedly the ability core. It grants special powers to the user, but most have a failure rate of over 95%. It is better not to even dream of trying it." Woo Young-kook reached into his bag and looked at the glowing object. "Of all things, I had to get this." A voice called out from the shadows, "Hey postman." He grimaced. "I really didn't want to run into you." My Eon stepped forward, holding a cigarette. "Are you asking for an appraisal? By bringing up your imaginary daughter again?" She exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Could you please stop doing that to my patient?" Woo Young-kook looked back at her. "No matter how difficult things are, I don't take things for free. I'm paying a fair price." My Eon asked. "What?" She shook her head. "That's not the point. This is about basic humanity." My Eon looked at him and asked, "Are you saying you didn't have a hard time? Someone is asking for help without paying a single cent?" Woo Young-kook replied, "That's right. To take over that mission, I asked Bae to handle the paperwork, but it was already assigned to another postman, so I lied and said he had a stomach ache to take his place. I felt bad asking directly, so I just sent a note." My Eon exhaled smoke and asked, "So instead of asking properly, you just sent a single note? Can't you just visit the clinic in person once in a while?" This is exactly why I didn't want to meet her in person. My Eon stepped closer and said, "I'm doing this for you, so you owe me one. You'd better help me out later." Woo Young-kook looked away. Yeah. My Eon glared at him. "And from now on, how about you treat me with the respect I deserve, Mr. Postman? I don't know how it was when you were still a hunter." My Eon held a cigarette near his face and said, "But you're just a postman now." Woo Young-kook looked away. "In this world, some survived using a core. Despite the low success rate, they acquired unique abilities and were granted the right to join a group called the Hunters, carrying out various missions in total secret. And I am also one of the survivors who used a core and lived. The Republic of Korea prays for the safe return of Postman Woo Young-kook. 48 hours remaining until the mission deadline. Failure to return within the time limit will be classified as death. In the line of duty, all personal belongings left within the facility will be repossessed by the state." Woo Young-kook adjusted his bag as he stepped forward. He said, "I am a bit later than I expected." "Well, Dr. My Eon held me up." "In that case, let us hurry." Special express delivery. The destination is AAA, in Namdong-gu Incheon, an area plagued by violent power struggles. Leadership changes so frequently that headquarters cannot grasp the current situation. And among those places, AAA is a residential complex, notorious for cutting off all contact with the outside world. The delivery condition is a direct handoff to the recipient. But I am going to finish this 2 days ahead of the deadline, one way or another. That way those annoying bastards will have no choice but to acknowledge me. Wu Youngkook sat among the ruins and opened his map. It has been a long time since I have been in this area. If I recall correctly, there was a safe zone around here. Did it get hit by a black pillar? This is one of the few places we can actually get in touch with. Wu Youngkook looked around the ruins. Looking for help nearby is impossible right now. Should I take another route? A loud voice echoed through the rubble. That is way too expensive. He turned toward the sound. Listen here, you drunk. Then what do you suggest? The argument continued in the distance. If you have supplies to spare, just pay Kim and get lost. I will go by myself. Youngkook watched from the shadows. What? They are Postman. He observed the two men closely. Are they fighting? I have seen them once or twice at the department. He leaned against a wall to watch. Perfect timing. I was just about to ask for directions. The taller man looked frustrated. What? You are actually going to trust people like them? Youngkook stared at the small man. Is Kim finally going to die? The postman turned away and shouted, I am leaving, so do whatever you want. Wu Youngkook looked at the strangers and said, let's hear what these people have to say. Wait, don't be like that. One leaves and another arrives? He noticed Youngkook. One leaves and another arrives? The hooded figure approached and asked, hello Mr. Postman, where are you headed? It looks like they want to negotiate with the other group. The man stopped in front of him and said, if you're willing to pay a small fee, we can guide you. Would you like to make a trade? Should I accept? The stranger smiled beneath his hood and said, Mr. Postman, don't worry, we are truly peace-loving people. There is one rule to remember, outside of headquarters, survival, and the absolute law you must carve into your heart to follow those rules. Anyone who speaks of peace is a liar. Kim called out from behind, wait young man. Wu Youngkook turned away. TCH, a complete waste of time. Rather than asking them for help, I would be better off alone. Kim suddenly appeared at his side and gripped his arm. Those are some fine muscles. Young man. Wu Youngkook froze in shock. What? This old man? Since when was he here? Kim snapped his fingers and said, good, you pass. Follow me. He walked ahead and asked, what are you doing? Aren't you coming? Wu Youngkook followed him and asked, where exactly are you trying to send something? Kim replied, the same place you are headed. Wu Youngkook asked, what, you know where I am going? Kim gestured wildly and said, where else would we be? This is Buchan. Wu Youngkook looked confused and said, but I am trying to get to Incheon? That is right. I am going to Incheon too. Alright, let us get moving. They walked through the ruins. As the sun began to set, Wu Youngkook watched the figures in the distance and asked, what are those people trying to lead us into? Kim spat on the ground and said, those guys are from the nearby residential complex or something. Looks like they have locked down this entire area. Humph, what a load of crap. He is right, but how does this old man know that? Wu Youngkook turned to him and asked, what did you see that makes you call it nonsense? Kim pointed a finger and shouted, instinct. This one is a bit off in the head too. Wu Youngkook sighed and said, well, it seems you had the same idea and avoided them. So Mr. Instinct, why do you not just go your own way? Kim followed closely and replied, did I not say I am going to Incheon with you? Wu Youngkook frowned and said, I never asked you to. Great, then you are coming with me. This man has a terrifying aura, different from Director Bei. Heo Wang asked, young man, what is your name? Wu Youngkook replied, Wu Youngkook. Wu Youngkook, we are both Wu's little brother. All Wus hail from Danyang. There is only one clan, so we are basically brothers. I knew it the moment I saw you. Those features definitely run in our family. Let us go together, brother. You said we are heading to Buchan, right? Wu Youngkook sighed and said, could you please just be quiet? And the destination is Incheon. AAA. This is calculated recklessness. Heo Wang said, doesn't that place refuse to take deliveries? You have got some rotten luck. Wu Youngkook replied, it is my job, so I have to try. Wow, look at that sense of responsibility. I am starting to like you, even more, you know? He is following right in my footsteps. Come to think of it, he turned down their offer, saying he would go alone in this dangerous area. Most likely just as I suspected. He saw right through those guys' intentions. Actually, there is a reason why I am letting this old man instinctively follow me. Anyway, brother, where are you headed? And he approached me naturally, without making a sound. Is he trying to save me from the scavengers? Or is he just trying to save himself? Kim looked at the horizon and said, hey, the sun is about to set. Let's take a 2-hour break in that building. They moved into the shadows of the ruins to rest. He just fell asleep like that? Whether he's actually sleeping or just pretending, his hand is still on his bag. He has a weapon for self-defense. I don't quite get it, but he's definitely no amateur. His hand is still on his bag. He has a weapon for self-defense. Woo Young-kook leaned against the wall and said, I'll sleep for 30 minutes, while keeping an eye on things. He closed his eyes, but his grip remained firm on the pistol hidden inside his messenger bag. Kim drew his handgun and aimed it directly at the back of the mailman. He smirked and said, You have got good instincts, man. Woo Young-kook and Kim aimed their weapons at the shadow emerging from the stairs. Woo Young-kook lowered his gun. Ha! Bei raised his hands and said, Don't shoot. Bei looked at the old man and said, Mr. Kim, is that really you? Kim frowned and asked, Didn't you follow those guys earlier? Bei stepped forward and replied, I did, but. Woo Young-kook aimed his gun and shouted, Stop, don't move. Kim stammered in fear, Why are you doing this? Young man, we saw each other earlier, remember? Please, just let me. Woo Young-kook cut him off. Don't make me repeat myself. Keep your right arm up and unzip your jacket, right now. Kim hesitated, but slowly reached for his zipper. Woo Young-kook watched him closely. Mr. Kim. As the jacket opened, a ticking device was revealed, strapped to his chest. Woo Young-kook gasped. Mr. Kim, what the hell happened? Kim gritted his teeth and said, Those bastards pretended to guide me, then they dragged me to a corner and robbed me blind. Bei crossed his arms and said, See, I told you to listen to me. But they had a kid with them. Kim replied desperately, They did not look like bad people. Woo Young-kook looked away and said, It is a classic raider tactic. They use a child as a prop to lower your guard. No one brings a 5-year-old on a dangerous outside sweep, unless it is a trap. Mister, at this rate. Kim looked down and replied, Yeah, I know. Woo Young-kook stared out at the ruins. They are definitely watching us. The one who planted the bomb must be hiding nearby. Their goal is obvious. Use Kim as bait. Kill anyone who tries to help, and take all the loot. He looked at the old man. I am sorry, but you are already a dead man. Woo Young-kook turned to his companion. Mr. Face Reader, pack your things. Please do not leave me behind. Kim cried out. Bei drew his weapon and said, You really do not listen, do you? Woo Young-kook pointed his weapon and said, Face the bomb towards the ground, and lie flat. Kim collapsed to the floor in terror. Are there explosives on the sides, or back of the belt too? Kim trembled and replied, No, only on the front. Woo Young-kook crouched down and said, Mr. Kim, listen carefully. If you have any info on those bastards, tell me right now. Kim stammered, Info? Those guys. They had dozens of underlings. 2 of them looked like the bosses, and it sounded like they were planning to attack another settlement. Where is it? I don't know that much. I wasn't captured for that long. They said they were hiring mercenaries to attack a settlement. If they are hiring mercenaries, they aren't just street-level raiders. They are a pretty large group. The guy I talked to earlier might be one of the bosses. If they are hiring mercenaries, they aren't just street-level raiders. They are a large group. The guy I talked to earlier might be one of the bosses. Woo Young-kook looked at the old man. Mr. Kim, you drunkard. He turned and walked away. When I get back to HQ, I will definitely report this. Kim watched him leave and asked, Is there really no way for me to live? Mr. Kim. Bei looked at him and said, Knowing it is your final moment, and having the time to calmly prepare yourself before you go is a blessing. Little brother. Little brother. It is the truth. Monsters rushing in suddenly. Unexpected sniper fire. Unannounced airstrikes. In this world, there are too many lives that get snuffed out in the blink of an eye. Woo Young-kook walked through the desolate ruins of the city, with Kim following close behind. He walked past the rubble, where bodies lay forgotten, among the shadows of the city. He looked up as a sudden flash blinded the horizon. Woo Young-kook took a bite of food and said, Yes. His companion looked at him and asked, Back there with Mr. Kim, why did you ask for info on those raiders? You said you would report them to HQ too. Young-kook replied, They attacked a postman, so of course we have to report it, and we need intel for that. The man narrowed his eyes and asked, Just to report them? Is that all? Young-kook asked, Why, did you think I was going to get revenge? For him or something? The man laughed and said, Haha, maybe, but Kim had a core on him, and he didn't even use it till the very end. Young-kook looked surprised. He had a core? If it was a rare one, those raiders hit the jackpot. It wasn't rare. The man replied. He said it had a 98% failure rate. With a rate like that, there is a chance it was an ability core. Exactly. Young-kook said, If it were me, I would have carried it like insurance, and used it when I was really about to die. He looked down at his bag. It is probably not as easy as it sounds, even when faced with 100% chance of death. He looked at the bag. It is probably not as easy as it sounds, even when faced with a 100% chance of death.